fascist and racist economic philosophy of the current Republican Party. Everything is privatized. They want to keep enriching a private sector that is already excessively enriched at the top, and they want to starve the public sector. And that's a recipe for disaster. And that's also a recipe, a dangerous recipe for the kind of climate that encourages very toxic forms of anti-Semitism. Because when we look at the history of Germany after World War I, who was blamed for runaway inflation in Germany? Jews were blamed for that. So there's a debate amongst some people about whether or not the Republican Party is now explicitly anti-Semitic, whether or not Donald Trump was explicitly anti-Semitic. And my opinion on that is it doesn't matter that much whether they are explicitly anti-Semitic. I think they are. But what is more important is that they are creating a climate that enables anti-Semitism. They're doing it economically and they're doing it politically.
Thank you. Thanks. Yes, I'd say a lot of the time, like you can say, oh, such and such anti-Semitic or sexist or whatever they might be, but it's often the conditions they create that are more important. Like maybe if a politician or whatnot isn't sexist, but they create the climate where there's such a desperation for any work that people feel stuck being in jobs that are full of sexual harassment and not reporting it and not getting any help, then the result is still much better. That they don't also hate women, but the result is still very bad, and you still need to change that.
Right. We have to be policy oriented in the society. We have to move away from naive individualism, and we have to look at the impact of policies, and that informs my approach to activism, and it informs my approach to how I look at issues like economic inequality.
Excellent, thank you. So, sorry, I need a minute to pull up the rest of my questions. What's feminism and why is it important? What's your advice for young women, men, and non-binary folks looking to advance gender equality today?
So, feminism is a lot of things to a lot of different people, but for me, it's full equality for women in an equal partnership with men and with non-binary people who don't easily fall into male or female categories, who may see themselves as they or them. I see myself as a she and a her, but it's important to know that not everyone is a she or a her or a he or a him. Some people are a they or a them. And it is also the movement that will liberate all women. It's not enough that a relatively few, primarily white women, have made it to the top in corporations. So-called corporate feminism, that's not feminism to me. Feminism to me is addressing situations like the fact that internationally there are more young girls deprived of access to education than there are young boys. That's across the board internationally. And I would say that Malala is one of my feminist heroes, because look at her trajectory from how she got to where she was to where she is now. That she was attacked for wanting to go to school. And now I believe she's either a student or a graduate of Oxford University, and she's also a coalition builder because she's built coalitions with other women and girls to advance women's and girls' access to education. And most recently, I don't remember the name of the woman, but she met with a young woman who's very active in trying to persuade more global leaders to address climate change.
Is that Greta Thunberg or is that someone else?
Yes, that's who it was. Thank you.
Pleasure. That's great. Yeah, she is really, Malala is really amazing. I mean, she was literally almost killed for wanting an education, but she's, after all that, she continues to not only to get her own education, which is amazing, and she's also out there making sure that other people, more people around the world will have an education, and also, and just really, it's always amazing when people do literally the most brutal things to stop somebody from trying to make whatever positive change they're trying to make. And then that person is, or those groups of people who endured that are just like, we're gonna go and make that change anyhow. It's really amazing.
I mean, in terms of advice that I would give younger people, and especially younger people in an academic environment, there was something that Nancy Pelosi said to a young woman who asked her what her advice would be to someone who wanted a career in politics similar to the one that Nancy Pelosi has. And it was 3 words, but it's 3 words that I think are very important. And those words are have a plan. Because some of what I did was by chance. And I think that at each stage of life, it's important to step back and say, what is my plan? How am I going to connect, for example, what I'm majoring in with the kind of life I want to live, the kind of changes I want to make in the world. And one person can't do everything, so it's important to have a focus. I know that often I have to fight back against feelings of being overwhelmed and feeling despair because the problems seem overwhelming. Just the question of how we're going to fight back against the fascism that is engendered by the Republican Party through their continued cult of personality allegiance to Donald Trump, that's a huge question in and of itself.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Yeah, that's really, it's amazing how much clearer stuff gets when you plan it and you're like, just start thinking, not that you're going to have all the answers, but just start considering what might I do that would make this better. What does being Jewish mean to you? Which Jewish thinkers, activists, and aspects of our people, art, and culture mean the most to you, and why? What would you like everyone to know about? Yeah.
That in itself could be the subject for an entire podcast. I think I've already made it clear that I have tremendous pride in and draw inspiration from and hope from the core values of the Jewish prophetic tradition, which to me, as I've said before, are tzedek, tzedek tirdah, and tikkun olam. I want to be careful about how I say this next part because of some complicated issues I'll get into, but certainly Abraham Joshua Heschel and his alliance with Dr. King is a source of great inspiration for me, but I want to say that with a proviso, because something that I've learned from the leadership of Black Jews is that sometimes Heschel is cited in ways that are sort of a cop-out, a get out of jail card for white Jews to do the work that we still need to do in terms of addressing racism in the Jewish community. There's a Black Jewish rabbi named Sandra Lawson who talked about how she had a very unsettling experience with a white Jewish man when she was trying to talk to him about her experiences with racism in the Jewish community. And he would, instead of listening to her and learning from her experiences, he would keep trying to switch the conversation to anti-Semitism. And I've heard this before. I've heard instances where this has happened before, where someone who is Black and Jewish will bring up the issue of racism, especially when it's racism that they experience from white Jews in the Jewish community. And because the white Jewish person who's listening feels uncomfortable with that, they want to switch the discussion to anti-Semitism. And that is not a good thing. And that actually brings me to another element of Jewish values and Jewish traditions that's very important, because the most important prayer in Judaism starts with the word Shema, which is Hebrew for listen. So along with the pursuit of justice and tikkun olam, making the world a better place, we can't do that. We can't build what Martin Luther King called a beloved community. We can't build effective coalitions across differences of gender and race and class if we don't listen to other people. You know, and listening is not just hearing in a superficial way. It's deep listening. For a few years, I was involved in a Jewish Palestinian dialogue group in Brooklyn. And when issues of oppression are brought up, when Palestinians talk about their perceptions of how they are oppressed by the state of Israel, it isn't always easy to listen. It's painful to listen, but we have to listen anyway. Because if we listen, we will learn, and we will find stronger paths towards solidarity.
Thank you. That is really, really, really good. It's really amazing how much just with when you listen, then it's like things become clear because you're hearing how other people, it's like everybody got like a little prism that can show like a tiny little bit of the world. So if you want to know more than a very, very, very tiny little bit, which is not going to be enough for any kind of coalition, then you have to listen, because other people are usually willing and happy to give you their bit too, but you can't get it unless you listen.
Right.
Thanks. Thank you. That's good. Let's see. So what are some of the biggest problems with our economy and politics and culture, even though it wasn't in the original transcript, both in the US and globally? And what can we, regular citizens, do to fix them?
Well, I think I touched on some of my views about the economy and what I was saying about
Yes.